Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So today we have Mr. Motz, our counsel, Dr. Bishop, W. Superintendent, and our liaison for the policy committee. As Trustee Hall, I am Trustee St. John, the chair of the policy committee, and Trustee Derringer is still tied up in the facilities committee meeting since he has to do double duty on that. So we are going to go ahead and start without him. Hopefully he's fine. Did he indicate that he was?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so on the agenda for tonight, we'll just get right into it. The first thing is the policy discussion on House Bill 4141, which is cell phone restrictions. Most people probably know that the state has passed, basically passed a law saying that we have to have cell phone restrictions during the school day. And then this is the proposed policy for how we would like to handle that. Or did we have two proposed policies, or did we decide on?
Well, this right here has a policy and some administrative guidelines for it, so based upon House Bill 4141, as it relates to cell phones, we have Mr. Motz here is going to explain what the thinking behind this. This is kind of a boilerplate language from Valarie, as far as what they've been using in other districts, and there's a couple of different options that are also highlighted for us that we can go through tonight. And then, of course, I would like the opportunity to take this back to staff, to be able to talk to them, and then bring information back to the committee at the next meeting.
Okay, so this is just discussion, not going to advance a policy from this meeting.
Correct. So this law, House Bill 4141, created a new section of the revised school code. It's 1303A. And there's a couple things that it does. Obviously, the biggest thing is it requires the school district to implement a policy that prohibits the use of wireless communication devices on school grounds during instructional time. So then there are certain definitions in the law, what school grounds means, what a wireless communication device means, but they don't define what instructional time means. So that gives us some leeway on what do we want to define instructional time is, and we'll talk about that when we go through the proposed policy. So the law requires that you have to have, disciplinary issues, or restrictions on it, but you can go more stringent than the law. So the law is basically the floor, we can go above it. And then there are certain statutorily required exemptions. Just for example, like if there's a medically necessary device that can be in there. In emergency situations under your emergency operations plan, that a cell phone could be used in that situation. If it's a lesson-specific assignment that the teacher wants them to use it for, that could be. So there are some of those. Some other requirements, obviously you have to post it on the website and things like that, we'll do as part of your own policy manual. So in front of you, we have, which would be Section 21 of Article 4 would be the new proposed policy. We put this together as part of the policy service. This policy doesn't need to be in place until next school year, but we're bringing it now so that we have time, as Dr. Bishop said to have some discussion about this. So obviously the policy does generally follows the law with the proposed policy in terms of the definitions that were in the law. But if you see there at the bottom of page 1, the top of page 2, there's two options. And those are really how you want to define instructional time. And these are ones that we've proposed, and I'll sort of give them as one is the, sort of the very stringent one, which is option 2. So that's basically the way it's proposed is from when the first bell until the last bell of the day. So all day long, the kids can't touch their cell phone.
Which would mean they can't check it at lunch.
Yeah, if there's, if obviously at lunchtime for the middle school and high schoolers, that there's passing time, that would all be prohibited. That's one that, we put in there as an option. The option 1, the other one is more of the defined time period. So inside classrooms, if it wasn't lunchtime, if it was passing period, those would be the okay times. If it's at lunch, you could look at your phone. If you're walking between in the hallways in between class, you could look at your phone. And so that's the one that one or a variation, obviously there's certain things that we've listed in there of what is and what isn't on instructional time. And so we can always look at that, and that's something you can get feedback from staff and you guys, you can, so, but I personally like option one, because my kids are in school, and I text them during the day, so, you know, they know not to text during class, but like, hey, they need to know who's picking them up or whatever, and they do that at lunch or whatever, so that's my, but, you know, it's up to you guys. We sort of gave those as sort of like one or the other, but there's lots of variations you can have in between. So that's how we put that together, because again, the statute doesn't define that, it leaves it to the school district to provide the flexibilities you guys deem, which, you said. So that's the policy. You know, we go into, you know, what, you know, there's process of, except during the defined exemption periods, they have to have them turned off. You can't be using them, stored away in their backpack, of when they can use them. You know, obviously we get into the exemptions, and we also talk about other things, you know, tablets, you know, iPads, all of those things would all be included in that. But that, the exemptions are all the statutory, and then, you know, we would have an enforcement policy, is in the student code of conduct, you know, using these things, and we would have that all addressed there. Now, the last thing you'll see at the policy, it's the last section, privacy and liability. The only thing is, you know, obviously if there is the utilization of a cell phone, we would obviously, if a kid's texting on it in the middle of the class, we know that's a pretty easy one. But then if we don't know, maybe if we heard and we want to investigate, we just wanted to highlight there's the Michigan Internet Privacy Protection Act, that the school district can't request for them to give passwords to their phone. That's the one thing that's been in the law for a while. And so it's just a highlighting that, just so it's in the policy so that administrators know, like, hey, we can investigate whether they used it, because it can't be like, oh, give me your password to your cell phone, I want to see if you actually texted somebody at 11:47 a.m., you know, what you're doing in class. So that law can sometimes hamper our investigation. So we highlighted it here just because we wanted to make sure it's on everybody's the front of mind with respect to this type of thing, because that is another law that comes into play with this. But hopefully that won't be an issue, but that's why that's there. And then the administrative guidelines go into more detail of what's prohibited use, when's not prohibited use, and we can go through those. And then obviously violations with respect to disciplinary action in the school code, up to, you know, levels of discipline. So that's what's been proposed. Like I said, except for what the law requires, we have lots of flexibility on it, and we can go from there.
And I agree with you on option one, defining instructional time as actually when you're learning and letting kids check in during lunch, because I do think some parents communicate, I know I do, I'll say, you know, here's where we're gonna pick you up, or I forgot you have an appointment, so I'm coming to get you, or whatever. But I'd like to hear from our teacher as to, is it often disruptive if kids come back from lunch and have been using their phones? Would you prefer that they not be allowed to use it on school grounds at all?
No, I mean, I think they're gonna find ways to communicate if there's things that they're doing that, you know, I think they're gonna put up a Google Doc and share it and communicate that way. Like, there's lots of ways for them to communicate. So I think it's appropriate to have them have access at lunch. I do notice, you know, when my kids leave to go to the bathroom, it's like they wanna grab their phone and then they're out there and friends are out there too. So, you know, but that's a building policy that they can address at that point. I don't think we have to restrict it.
You say grab their phones now, do they have like in a pouch on
Yeah,
the
I collect
door?
them.
Okay.
Since I have calculators, they swap out.
So they
their
go to
phones
the
for
bathroom and
calculators.
they grab it,
Yeah.
but then you can see that.
Right, and I mean, no, push your phone back, but it's in the hallway or, you know, so then there are things where they're like, oh, I forgot my uniform for softball, and they need to go, you know, my mom needs to bring it to me, so had they have to have a pass to go down to the office, then it takes a lot more time than if they could just take care of it
It's a good point.
in between classes or something like that. So I don't have a problem with that. I think when it gets abused, then that's more of a disciplinary issue than
And that's the one thing I want to be to take back to staff is it's more than just the policies, the administrative guideline. It's also attached here is because we also don't want to get teachers in the business of just always been around management. We want them to be able to teach the content. So we have to really think about, okay, what does it look like when that rule is violated? Who's taking charge of it? What does it look like as far as restoring the devices? And kind of get that kind of worked out throughout the AGs. That way teachers can definitely be within the business of teaching.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want somebody in charge of walking around at lunch and seeing if anybody's on their phones and, you know, looking in the halls to see if they don't need to be wasting their time trying to catch students doing that.
Yeah, part of it is a realistic approach of how can we do this based upon the law that's being, being given to us. How can we do this well based upon our policy?
So to your point, Trustee Hall, about taking it and going to the bathroom, obviously that wouldn't be allowed because that is still during a scheduled class period.
Yeah, it's not.
But I'm wondering if we should also include in the policy that you are not allowed to have phones or personal communication devices in the bathrooms at all. Because I think that there's no reason you would need to use your phone in the bathroom unless you're avoiding class and playing games on it, or, taking pictures that you don't want other people to see, or showing people things on your phone that you don't want any teachers to see. So that might be something to consider.
Yeah, and I think both of your examples actually are interesting ones because, well, it's more of like the softball one. My daughter plays softball too, so it's like, it's faster for them, even if you have the phone over on the wall, like, instead of, oh, here's a pass, walk down to the office, call mom or whatever, and then come back, that wastes 10, 15 minutes, as opposed to a quick text over there, hey, can you just go over there, boom, 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 and they're really done in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But then you get to the point of, well, which teachers are being a little bit more
Right.
flexible with that and not, and then it gets into who's administering that. But it does raise that there could be, obviously it's probably not lesson specific to fall squarely within one of the statutory exemptions, but it is more of a practical solution to a problem.
And I wonder if it's not lesson specific or teacher granted permission, temporary permission.
That's what I was
and
just looking at.
There are all kinds of things where we make judgment calls as professionals in the room to say, I worry about putting in you are not allowed to use it in the bathroom, because I think that might be a moment where you could have a student in crisis who might need to reach out, or an emergency issue, and so at that point, are they gonna care if they get in trouble or not? Probably not, but I just worry about them not being able to if they need to. I mean, I'm
That's something to
strict about
consider.
phones in my room, like, yes, my kids, like, they have to be in the pocket, and I check, and they're assigned, but there are times when they just have them, or might need them in an emergency situation. And at that point, it's bigger than
Well, for
whatever's
something
going
like,
on.
I forgot my uniform, I need to text my mom, do that during passing period.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, like, that's why I wouldn't have a problem if they were during passing periods. I wouldn't wanna restrict them during passing periods to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, and that's why mine was going more of, it's like, hey, I have to talk to my mom now so she can get it up here in time, because
Right.
the bus is leaving, it's like the last, so that would be like probably the exception to the more, hey, you can wait another 25 minutes when it's in passing time, text your mom, then usually that's sufficient, to get that stuff. So, there's, we can definitely look at some, massaging the language there, but those are some good examples.
And those are time, we don't have to minutia of all of them, but I think allowing it during passing time kind of takes into account some of those issues, and lunch helps take care of issues that might arise and need to be taken care of.
There's also be another one that's to come back based upon how it is being implemented throughout schools. So we might see some things that we didn't think about that may have to be added. So it goes back to what we've been doing with all of our policies, is kind of like revisiting them and then saying, okay, what are we seeing based upon the students that we have in our schools?
Yeah, I would definitely, because it sounds like option one is more in line with what we do now, which is off and out of sight. They don't, teachers don't want to be seeing it, but it's just a little more formalized. And I'd be interested in staff feedback on how the off and out of sight works. And do we need to make that stricter? Do we need to make the discipline action stricter, or just all get on the same page about it?
When it's different at the middle school than it is at the high school, correct? It's more bell to bell at the middle school, or has that changed? I thought the policy was bell to bell at the middle school, not during passing time.
Yeah,
not at
I
lunch.
don't recall.
And I think all three kind of do it a little differently. So I think
Okay.
part of it is like also being consistent on what we even currently do now. So I think they both do methods of that.
Yeah, I can't remember what the student conduct says about that, but we can definitely all get on the same page.
And for sure, like, I think this is a staff input, high priority, with their input rather than.
Yeah, because I know cell phones are a big distraction and causing problems for teachers, but I also don't want to put them in a position of having to police student cell phone use if it's not disruptive to the educational environment.
Yeah, so next step for me is take this to staff, and then also I'll work with, Mr. Motz here around some of the suggestions you've already, kind of given and see how they fit throughout the policy.
And definitely leaning toward option one on the, language there.
Got it.
I think it would be good to have some student input as well. I mean,
They might think of
Suggestions
things
and
that we
things,
have
yeah.
not, yeah.
just
Sure.
to have them feel like they're part of the process.
That's just like we did last time.
Mhm.
We did as well. Perfect.
Is there anything else, any other feedback you need from this committee before going back to staff and students?
No, if you think of anything between now and then, let me
Sure.
know, but I'll start that, not the end of this week, early next week. Next item we have is for criminal background checks. We do currently have a policy on that, but I'm gonna have Mr. Motz, I'm kind of go over why it's important for us to have an updated, or this is an accident, I have updated, we need an AG.
Yeah.
This is correct, we need an AG for this one, depending on if we get an audit or not. So can you kind of hand walk through for the board why the necessity behind this administrative guideline?
Yeah, so currently we have policy 5.04 that requires criminal background checks and professional conduct checks of all staff, independent contractors. That's heavily regulated under section 1230 and 1238 of the school code, lays out exactly what you have to do. It's both state and federal fingerprint-based background checks. And this policy covers everything that's required by law. So recently, and for those who've been working with this, in the school, this criminal background check law was enacted in 2006, and at that time, when it was first enacted, independent contractors, outside service providers that were providing individuals that work regularly and continuously in the schools that would then trigger the requirement to have them fingerprinted, were doing those fingerprints and then providing them, or they had access to them, and then back about 10 years ago-ish, the FBI started doing some auditing of state agencies, and Michigan was one of them, and then sort of how Michigan was doing it, they didn't like it, so they had to change, which then got into this red light, green light letter. So now the fingerprint-based background checks can only be done by the school. The outside contractors can't do it because it has to be the government entity, and then the district gets it, they review it, and then they give a red light or green light letter. Green light says that individual who's working for that company that needs to be fingerprinted can come work in our school. There's no prohibited, criminal background on them that would stop them or not allow them to work in school. Or a red light if they did have something that wasn't allowed, they say that person can't be there. So that's what the district follows now. It follows all the appropriate protocols in place in terms of storing information in that. So the district's fine. Now, what we've learned with our work with lots of schools across the state is there's a couple state school districts on the west side of the state where the state police now is doing, they sort of do these rolling audits of schools, and they seem to be in their audit time now of going over this criminal background check stuff. I don't know if it's prompted something by the federal or what have you, but now the state police is starting to implement these, and two of our clients that use the policies on the west side of the state, are for these audits. And so what the state police is wanting to see as part of its audit process is documented procedures and protocol that you guys are following. Even though you guys might be doing all the things correctly, they want to see it in writing, which, okay, fine. So what we've done is, you guys are not subject to the audit, but we're saying, hey, let's get everything in place, so if they come over to this side of the state, we're all, so really all this administrative guideline is putting on paper everything you guys are currently doing that's required by law, and you guys are already doing, but we've now put it down on paper, so if they do come to audit, we can say, hey, we got everything here. Also, we do have the benefit, is we've seen some of the audit papers that the state police is now putting together, so we're able to use that to help frame this even better. So we'll hopefully be one step ahead of the law when they come around, if they do. So that's the purpose of this, is why it's there. There's no need for it under the law. It's more, we want to be proactive and say, hey, let's get this in place, so if something does happen, even though we're doing everything by the law, they want it on paper, and that's what they're requesting, so hey, we're doing it. So that's really all this is. And to the extent we want to go and revise, like I said, we've had the benefit of some of their documentation as part of these other audits, so we were able to do this in frame, so we're pretty tight and in line with that, so we feel comfortable with that, but otherwise, that's the reason why this is coming forward.
Yeah, just some extra precautions in case we do get audited, but there's no concerns right now.
Yeah.
So my only question on that would be that we have blank for title, as far as who's designated as the local agency security officer. Would it make sense to have our school resource officers fulfill that position, or is that something that,
We could look at that, yep.
because I was just thinking the school resource officers are currently funded under funding that
Yeah.
at any moment can get taken away, and might be nice job security to have an additional duty that's integral to the work of the school district.
Who else, for school districts that don't have SROs, who would fill that role?
Usually they have somebody at, at the administrative level. It's usually in the human resources department, so you have the director of human resources would generally be that person. And we could do the director of human resources, we could award their designee, but obviously that causes confusion, we've talked about other policies. So I think it would be the director of human resources, or we could look at the SRO if that's something you want to look at. Just because the SRO might not always be funded, so maybe the human resources might be the more steady person that's gonna, they're always gonna be in the district.
Well, that was my thinking, if the funding that we use for them is taken away, they can be rolled in as more of an employee of the district. And we could justify that by saying they fulfill this necessary HR sort of capacity. But that's just an idea though, whatever the administration is comfortable with as far as the designee is.
The only thing I just want to check is to make sure, I want to go back and look at the state, although, because the SRO is generally, while we have a contract with them, they're employed by the city or whichever the police department is. And I'll go back and double check that. I don't think that there's anything that would prohibit, because they also are a government agency, so they would fall within the permissible rules. Just want to double check. But if that one causes a problem, we'll have the director of HR.
Either way is fine. It's just an idea to spread the load a little bit more. And is there anything else you need from this committee, or are we ready to, once the administration decides who the designee is, are we ready to take it to the board, or do we want some more time to?
The only other question that I had, it's highlighted in yellow, is the volunteer, and it's more of understanding how the district continues to address volunteers, because volunteers aren't legally required to be subject to criminal background check. Mostly we do I-chat checks, so if you guys are just doing the I-chat checks and not actually the criminal-based background checks, like the fingerprint-based, then we can scratch that off.
I didn't even know there was a big difference, but yeah, I know we don't use
Most do
fingerprint
I-chat
volunteers
because
right now.
the fingerprint-based ones costs money, and
Yeah.
sometimes a volunteer's only
Takes a
here for
while
like,
to-
it takes a while.
Right.
And a volunteer is only here for like maybe a week or something, parent working on
Yeah,
and
they
off.
come in to do a Christmas party
Yeah.
or a holiday party.
A week, so in the I-chat check is free for schools, and that shows everything that's on the
That's
record.
what we do currently. Currently we do eye-checks.
Yeah. So I'm
And
okay,
that
so
could even be like chaperones that are
Yeah.
shuttling kids, so I think to do a criminal background check on that would be costly at
Yes,
every time.
yeah, that's obviously I'd love to have the most thorough possible background checks on file, but if we have tons of parent volunteers who are very involved, and I think that would really gum up the works to require anything, so strike that.
Yeah, we'll strike that one out. Okay.
And then Dr. Bishop, would you like that to go to the board at the next meeting?
Please.
I have a question about putting the SRO officers in this role, as there seems to be some training that goes with this. And so are they on rotating schedules, like is it like a 2-year assignment? So if they have to go through training every time, if it's a new person,
So the first contract we had was a 3-year
3
contract.
years?
Right? And so we had to establish another one now because the third year is getting ready to be up.
Mhm.
And we do have 2 different SRO officers, right? One is walked right in, Officer Martel. So there's one that we have that's based inside of North. There's one that's based inside of South. So we have to have some determination there as far as who potentially could help with what.
Right.
But we don't know the level of contract that we're going to enter into. We just know there's been a 3-year contract up to now.
So we have to address the training at that point, so I think whatever you're comfortable with, I would go with that recommendation. It just was something else that I thought of. That
Yeah,
would-
that's,
Yeah,
I hadn't
component.
thought of that.
If it's the HR director or designee, when we say that, then they can designate to the SRO or whatever else.
If they need to be
Current
employee,
business.
we're fine.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, so we'll
So
check
there's
that out to make sure there's
some gray
nothing in
areas in
the state police guidelines that we've been reviewing. That we'll be putting in the director of HR. Thanks, sir.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so as, striking volunteer determinations and, administration can decide who would be best, fit for the local agency security officer. And then once we get that, we'll go on the agenda at the next board meeting.
Yeah, sure.
All right?
Good. All right, next one we have is policy discussion on considerations prior to imposing of discipline. So this one, I feel like I've been talking to a lot of you around like our emphasis on our student code of conduct as far as having to be able to go through it and find certain things that we either bring clarity to or we can better communicate. And so this is one of them. So within the policy 4.09 is also an administrative guideline. And so before we consider discipline, especially when it comes to suspensions, we need to make sure that we are considering the 7 factors to see what we need to do to best support the child inside of the school setting before we get to a termination. So within this policy, it clearly lays out what we should be considering. It talks about the superintendent shall develop an appropriate checklist to be used to document consideration of these factors. That right there for me, once going through that, I wasn't here on the inception of what this looked like, but it came clear to me that we need to create a checklist. So what I have been working with Jeremy is this document right here. Jeremy already has one, but I'll pass around these 3. And it's in the very beginning stages of it, but it kind of goes over student name, the incident, what happened. It goes over the 7 factors as far as was it considered, and then comments about the consideration. And then it goes into after considered the factors above, discipline to be opposed. Then it also goes into the date of return. And so this is important for us. Number one is because we do want to make sure that we're bringing clarity on if we can keep students in school, that's important for us. And we also want to make sure we have a consistency across levels, and then also giving us more time as administrators to think about the consequences that we are imposing to make sure they match the incident that took place in that happened. So that's really important for us to be able to think more about this. And so this will potentially serve as the superintendent's checklist to make sure these things were considered and they will be housed and they will be kept. And then also goes to if discipline is imposed, involves removal from school, data return. And the reason why that is important is because we also need to make sure we have a reentry point for that student and that family. So where we can discuss what happened, what took place, what intervention plans we want to put in place, how do we help that student make sure he's not making the same mistake again. But also to be able to talk to the family about their perception of what happened, what they've been kind of working through, the information that we need to know to be able to build a success plan for that student we want to know at that moment in time. So I brought this one up because this is one of many, and I didn't give it to everyone, but there's several. I think I have about 8 items on here that over the course of the next couple of meetings I want to be able to address within the student code of conduct, because I think it's important that we bring clarity to not only this for our students, but also our families. So when they see the code of conduct, when we as administrators, when we read it, we kind of cut out some of the nuances about not seeing it from the same side.
I appreciate you taking a good look at this and involving our legal counsel too with the code of conduct to make sure that we're consistent across the buildings. Because I think that's been feedback that we've gotten from parents, is that this building will do something different than this other one. And obviously we didn't realize that we needed to have the superintendent develop an appropriate checklist. I assumed that existed, but I appreciate you finding out that it didn't. I think this proposed checklist is great. It's my only suggestion would be to take out optional on the comments, because it would be if the comments are optional, it'd be too easy to just check, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't necessarily be thinking about it, but if they have to even just put one comment, student's disciplinary history, none, that could be the comment, or does the student have a disability? No, could be the comment. It doesn't have to be anything long. I'm not trying to make more work for people, but I do think making sure it's slowed down and everything really is being considered individually instead of just, yeah, no.
Sure.
Do you want an explanation there, or just a comment? Like, an explanation would require a little more than just saying no.
Obviously, an explanation would be great, but I don't, if the student doesn't have a disability, they don't have one, and that's not really something we
Yeah,
need
like
to
1
consider.
through 5 of these is really what I'd call like a yes or no question. The age, obviously, the age is the age, but, a seriousness of the violation, obviously, you might have a comment, because it's no, it's not, because but then it'll sort of go with the incident with misconduct and that, but then you get into more of the 6 and 7 is more, where there's a lot more leeway of things that you can look at.
So we would hope to see a little explanation on 6 and 7 as to why they're choosing potentially suspension instead of a restorative practice or something like that. But I don't want to prescribe it too much.
No, I think that's good, because part of it is, as we were talking about as administrators, I talked to administrators about it last week. One of the things that we have some nuance in Grosse Pointe, especially when it comes to levels of discipline. So when you have 1 day through a 5-day suspension, it's called a separation. And then there's a revised school code that calls anything a day or beyond a suspension. And so that's just the term that we use in Grosse Pointe. So we're also going to be looking to clarify that term when it comes to, and special education will tell you, no matter if it's 1 hour or if it's 1 day, any removal is considered a suspension, but it's nuanced within our policies, and it's also not clear within our student code of conduct. So we also do want to clear that up along the way, because that's also a part of this. Is one of the things I'm also going to bring it back to the next meeting, because when you talk about considering these 7 factors within our policies, it talks about separation versus suspension. We're considering them whenever a child is removed. We want to make sure if there is a disability or because of a student age or depending on what happened, we want to make sure we're giving full consideration to that child. We also need to make sure we break down exactly what restorative practices is, and also how does PBIS intermingle with these things, because those are all interventions and supports for not only for our students, but also for our families. And we just want to be clear about that. As of right now, our student code of conduct is not clear about how those are intertwined with what we do as a school district. So, I haven't had a chance to pass this out to you yet, and I'll pass it around now. But you'll see, I'm trying to also align everything that we're doing to hopefully when our new strategic plan is, approved. This really falls underneath one of the goal statements where GPPSS will foster safe, inclusive, and supporting learning environments. And we do that through our communication, we do that through our expectations, we do that through our communication that we have not only with our staff, but also with our families. So you will also see the things that are impacted by policy and administrative guidelines, and also things that are just in student code of conduct. And so what I'm bringing back to you is we are looking at our elementary, middle, and high school handbooks to make sure those are revised and make sure we don't have any of the old Neola policies in those. We have all of our newer Clark Hill policies in those. We are going to be talking about the separation suspension language, especially when it goes to board policy 4.07 as it relates to levels of discipline. Talked about cell phone policy implementation, restorative practices, to be able to clarify. What does that look like? Is that the tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 intervention? We're going to break those down. We have the PBIS integration that we're going to be talking about in a future meeting. We also need to define what some of those things mean in the code of conduct. If you're not working in it every day, you won't know what some of those things mean. I think it's important for our community to know what that means, how it impacts a child on an everyday basis. And then clarity on the student discipline appeal process. Like what appeals come to central office, what appeals don't. How do you even appeal some of those things, especially when it's a 1 to 5 day suspension? And then re-entry meeting, documentation, clarity, and expectations. Because that is important. That is our opportunity to be able to say, hey, we're seeing this. What do we do about it? How do we create that success plan? If a student has an IEP, okay, what does it look like for us to look at an FBA or their BIP to make sure that we're opening it back up to see what supports are needed beyond just what is happening in general education. So as you can see, we're going to be talking about the student code of conduct at every meeting, and I would like a placeholder there for that, because we just have that much work to do, and I think our students deserve us to be clearer than ever as far as expectations for them.
Dr. Bishop, you said the magic acronym to make my ears perk up, and that's PBIS. Didn't that have its own specific goal in the strategic plan?
It did.
Was it in culture?
I want to say it's in culture, but it's kind of like a PBIS reboot.
Right.
All right.
Objective.
Yes,
Right.
A priority objective.
Yeah, I think it was in the culture section. I can look it up for us. So. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I just, showing how the things tie together, I think is important.
Mhm.
Right? So it's footnote at this moment, right, and I certainly, that was the question that I was gonna ask when we were talking about the checklist, is how does this integrate with what we are gonna be talking about with PBIS, so I'm glad you're, of course, a couple steps in front of me on that, but it's really important to understand that we're not talking about things in a silo, right, that this is quite the web of supports and systems that need to work together and pull in the same direction, so I think it's well done to start trying to get it all in front of us as kind of a holistic picture. So I wanted to, now that you mentioned PBIS, and I had that one point
That's in culture goal area number 2.
yeah, so it, again, we're touching on more than just that one, safe and learning environment. And there's going to be a lot of the stuff that is impacted just in the student code of conduct. So that's it for this item. Thank you.
I just had a couple questions. When the way it's written, it says suspended. So up here at the top under 4.09, the first two may be suspended, expelled, or permanently expelled. So suspended, would that include in-house and out of school?
Yes, but that's the nuance though, like suspended versus separation. We're treating it all like a suspension.
Okay, so are we taking away that language of separation?
We didn't even talk about that.
I know
You
that's.
know, and I don't know the reason why or how, I think that language has been in there since 1929. But I don't know how that language got in there, but I do know the revised school code looks at suspensions. And so we need to be careful about that because special education, quite frankly, the separation piece, that doesn't play into the law in which we have to operate with our students with disabilities, because whenever they see a removal, if it's a separation or not, it still counts towards the days before we get to an MDR. So we need to really look at that language. And I'm pretty sure there are reasons out there, like I've heard reasons before, like if you were going to a U.S. academy of some sort, that you're able to check the box saying that you were not suspended, you were just separated at some point, so that gives a student or their family like confidence to be able to say, this did not happen to me. But we need to look at it from a lens of our students. What do we need to do as far as bringing clarity to that language? That's important. So that's still TBD for us. But we are, as administrators, whether it's 1 day or whether it's 5, we're following the same process even with this to make sure we're doing our due diligence.
And then I just had a question down at the last 2 paragraphs. They talk about possession of a firearm in a weapon-free zone. In both cases, they use the word firearm. Why are we specific just to firearm? Why would it not be all weapons?
Firearms defined as to be a certain.
Illegal
Yeah.
term, okay.
Yeah, I know the law is a certain threshold when it's like a student has to be expelled.
Right, but, okay.
Yeah, because if a student brings a knife to school, they'd probably be expelled, but they don't have to be.
Okay.
The Michigan School Revised Code requires that anyone who brings a firearm on campus.
I just didn't know if we wanted
Yeah,
to be
firearms
more
defined
broad.
under section 1311 of the school code, so we just use the same terms that are in the school code, so we have.
So it'd be pointless to do the checklist and the consideration of factors if that's the consequence.
The end result might be the same if it were a different weapon, it's just that it's not mandated to be in the language.
All right, and then I have a question for Mr. Motz. Is are we even allowed to be calling them separations in order to, as Dr. Fisher mentioned, evade that check mark on college applications, if the Michigan School Revised Code considers any separation from school to be a suspension?
Well, the utilization of the term, we could still call separations. Now, it goes back to the definitions of make sure we're clarifying what it is. So the nuance comes into play if you look at, so the 7 factors of this on top of the checklist that we have, that comes out of 1310 of the school code, which is a newer law that before you suspend or expel a student under 4 specific provisions of the school code, you have to provide analysis of the 7 factors. And then if it's a suspension for 11 or more days, there's a presumption that the expulsion or suspension isn't warranted unless you can overcome this presumption, which you can by going through a little bit more detail. But if you suspend a kid, they used in the school code only uses the word suspension. So if you suspend a kid for less than 10 days, you're still supposed to consider the factors, but there's no, if you suspend a kid for under those 4 statutes, then you have to still consider the factors, but there's no presumption. So you could have a situation that didn't rise to a physical assault on a student, that's one of those categories. A criminal sexual misconduct or a gross misdemeanor, that's where you really get something bad. Or the fourth one is physical assault on a teacher. So if you could have something else that maybe didn't rise to that, but it was something more minor, but you still wanted to say you need to be out of school for a couple of days, we could sort of have to look, okay, maybe we could still call that a separation, and that's where the nuance is.
Okay,
So
so
you
it's
could
not
still
those
use,
four
yeah,
things.
but when you get into the utilization of the school code and then the code of conduct, is the school code only uses the term suspension. So a separation is gonna have to be clearly defined, and it's different. So that's where using it, I know it's been around, I tried to do some, background, even some of my partners have been working with the district for many years before me that I took over from. It's like, they're like, it's been around for as long as they can remember, and nobody can figure out where it came from. But, so we could potentially keep it, but I think we're gonna have to be really diligent on what it's for. So we don't get any confusion with one of the 7 factors and all of that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, so this is going back to administration and staff for now to really parse out what is gonna be the best.
I'd like to bring it back, for the next one, of course, with your suggestions, but also administration is gonna give me some more suggestions on this, and some more details, and then, like I said before, I'll be giving you this in a more finalized version as far as for in the future, but I need to bring back at every meeting. Probably definitely will, probably the July meeting. I'll be here on the all 3 of you, but, there's some things that we wanna get up and running for our students when they come back. That way, we have more clarity. And even after the school year starts, we're still gonna be coming to the table with more things. I think we need to continue to review this annually to make sure that it's clear for everybody involved.
So if this is going back to the administration, then one piece of feedback to take back as part of that discussion is, so we get to the checklist requirement when we're talking about out-of-school suspension. But the checklist has factors that could mitigate the need for this, right? Well,
It doesn't have to be out of school though, if you can understand.
correct, all of those definitions. But again, we got to this point and we have already progressed a certain amount down the process of behavior innovation, right? So teach the right behaviors positively, and as I kind of mentioned at our last board meeting. So if this is the mandated thing, once it crosses that threshold, then let's use that framework instead of having to mesh 2 things together, bring these forward, not just, it's PBIS until you're suspended and then it's a state law. They can be one thing,
Sure.
but it would be bringing these mitigating factors forward in the process. So how does a student's age impact how we teach whatever it is? How does a student's disability and the different types of disabilities play into these things? And that's the kind of stuff teachers and administrators and building professionals are really, really good at.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think our staff already does that, but formalizing it would be very helpful and to ensure consistency across the district.
But I think that's it though, like part of it is formalizing it because, as I've, I always kind of like living this out over the last, couple of years. When something is in somebody's head or they interpret it or they make something and they don't put it down on paper, it leaves with that person when they leave. Where I think people who all had a chance to kind of create this code of conduct all had great intentions about what it was. And I'm pretty sure they probably even had, okay, the checklist looks like this. I don't know what that was, so we need to make sure it's clear. So no matter who's sitting in any one of these seats, it's clear for our students that we don't want them to be harmed by something that was created without them in mind.
Okay, so that will come back at the next meeting after administration has more feedback on it and.
And the changes that we're committed here, we also want to make those as well and bring it back.
Yes, and so we have policy 4.09 already. Do you anticipate changing the policy or just adding administrative guidelines?
It might be some pieces that we might strike and we might change and come back with those as well. But I just want to bring it to light what we were working on. That way we can get some more guidance if there was, and they know we continue to bring this back. And then I also want to make sure I put on everyone's radar that this needs to be a constant item on every one of our meetings so we can bring more things back. And then I will finalize this timeline. I will go through and put as far as the strategic plan statements and objectives and in which order we probably need to get these done in May, June, and July.
You let me know what comes to the forefront and we'll schedule that for our next meeting.
Perfect, I appreciate it.
There's nothing further official. We are now open for public comments. The time limit is 3 minutes. I will set here. And so you have 3 minutes to comment. If you could stand up, state your name, and then just go ahead with that comment. Anybody?
I'll say something. Do you mind if I sit?
Yeah.
It's easy. The House and Senate bill, Kevin Nugent, Pointer Square Academic Excellence. The House and Senate bills that we are referencing are pretty straightforward. They were written to put weight behind district policies that would keep phones away during instructional time. As a teacher of 27 years, I can absolutely say that you can manage cell phone use in your class without the law, but a district policy to help keep them away from instructional time can certainly benefit both teachers and students. We would like to suggest you define instructional time as time in the classroom because a bell-to-bell policy goes beyond no phones in class and into no phones all day. We also strongly recommend you do not extend this out to student-sponsored activities to extend the school day. We would caution against any language that goes beyond the legal requirement. The boilerplate template also pulled in all personal devices, tablets, e-readers, and laptops, unless individually approved, and added language about bullying, harassment, recording, cheating, and so on. If these behaviors are already prohibited, there shouldn't be language added, given the successful habits most of our students demonstrate. We would also caution any policy that puts teachers in policing individual situations. In relation to the discussion that occurred earlier, I can say from experience that there are reasons why some female students in particular need their phones for needs that would be reluctant to share with teachers. I would rather a dozen kids sneak a message to a friend on a bathroom break than have one student need to explain to their teacher why they need their phone to text a friend on the way to the bathroom. This board would do well to align the policy with what the law intended, phones away during instructional time, and clear rules during emergencies. You can accomplish that by bringing teachers and administrators into the room to help shape the language around implementation and consequences. We need something grounded in data, workable in classrooms, and written clearly enough that it doesn't depend on who happens to be enforcing it that day. In regards to the behavior plan discussion, consistency is critical with any behavior plan. The mention of restorative practices is concerning and appealing at the same time. I have seen where restorative practices can be a great tool when implemented by an experienced staff trained in that process. I have also seen where restorative practices resulted in repeated infractions that eroded school culture and teacher morale. We ask that any policy not only consider the academic needs of the offender, but also the classroom or building as a whole, and make sure our staff is trained in the practices that we are going to implement. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So we'll move on to committee member comments. Trustee Hall, do you have any closing comments? Trustee Derringer?
I apologize for being late. Thank you guys for being patient and letting me crash right in the middle of the meeting and jump right in. Appreciate that. Your flexibility is really appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Motz, do you have any final words?
No, I think we're good.
Dr. Bishop?
No, thank you for your time tonight.
All right, yes, and President Derringer, I can fill you in on what we discussed beforehand after the meeting. And just to summarize on agenda item 2.1, which is about the cell phone restrictions, we are sending that back to staff with our feedback and going to get more feedback on how that's actually going to look in the classroom. So that is probably on the agenda for next meeting again.
Just to be clear, we do not want police to be an active party in having to police this and investigate these things. We do want to make sure classroom teachers specialize in teaching our students in the classroom and cell phone. We don't want to be distracted.
Yes, and hopefully they will look at the policy and tell us and give us that feedback of what's going to work for them on a day-to-day basis. The policy discussion on criminal background checks for Administrative Guidelines 5.04 will probably be on the agenda at the next board meeting to get a vote from the full board.
Correct.
That's not especially controversial, it's just kind of tidying things up to protect us in case of an audit.
Probably, is there a timing component there, or is it probably first read on the 27th and then
First
vote
read
the
is
next?
fine.
Yeah, it's up to you. I'm fine with it being first read, second read, because that doesn't,
That's the
It's
default,
not
unless
urgent,
there's some,
yeah.
some urgency.
I don't think there's any urgency, it's just an added layer of protection in case of an audit. Apparently they're in their audit era.
Yeah. There's no, when you do first read, second read, there's no like, it has to be done by day one or anything like that.
Yeah, even if we have it on the agenda, that probably helps us if there was an audit tomorrow, which there won't be. And then for agenda item 2.3, considering policy 4.09, we will probably bring that back at the next meeting as well after more feedback from staff.
Sure. Absolutely.
And with that, we are adjourned at 7:22.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.